All right, let's talk about something that touches millions of lives but is so often surrounded by a lot of fear and just plain wrong information: Alzheimer's and dementia. Today, our goal is to cut through that confusion and bust some of the most common myths out there. Let's dive in.
You know, when we hear these words, our minds can jump to a lot of conclusions. But how much of what we think we know is actually the real story? We're going to spend the next few minutes separating fact from fiction so we can get a much clearer picture.
Okay, first things first, we have to get our definitions straight. If we're going to bust some myths, we've got to be on the same page about the big question. What's the actual difference between dementia and Alzheimer's?
This is a huge point of confusion for so many people, so let's clear it up. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Dementia isn't one specific disease. It's an umbrella term for a whole set of symptoms. Kind of like how a fever isn't the illness, it's a symptom. Well, Alzheimer's is the most common disease that actually causes those dementia symptoms. So right there, myth busted. They are not the same thing.
And that brings us to another huge misconception: the idea that serious memory loss is just a normal part of getting old. It's really not. Look, we all forget where we put our keys sometimes, right? The difference with Alzheimer's is pretty profound. It's not about forgetting where the keys are, it's forgetting what they're even for. That really shows you that Alzheimer's is a disease, not just a normal part of aging. So, okay, we've established that the memory loss here is different, it's serious. But does that automatically mean that any significant memory problem must be Alzheimer's?
No, absolutely not. And this is exactly why getting a proper diagnosis from a doctor is so critical. There are a bunch of other conditions, and some of them are totally reversible, that can look a lot like dementia. Simple things like a vitamin deficiency, thyroid issues, or even side effects from medication can cause serious memory problems. So that myth that all serious memory loss equals Alzheimer's, definitely not true.
All right, so now that we've got a clearer definition of what we're talking about, let's get into who is at risk. There are some really persistent myths here, especially when it comes to age and our genes.
This is probably one of the biggest myths out there. When we think of Alzheimer's, we tend to picture someone, in their 70s or 80s. But is that really the whole picture?
Not even close. In fact, a solid 5 to 10% of cases are what's called younger onset Alzheimer's. This is when the disease shows up in people who are in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. That fact alone completely shatters the idea that this is only a disease for old people.
This is another huge source of fear for so many. If your mom or your dad had Alzheimer's, does that mean you're destined to get it too? Let's really look at the role our DNA plays.
So genetics can be a little complicated here. For that rare, early onset form we just talked about, there are some very specific gene mutations that can be passed down and directly cause it. But for the vast majority of cases, the late onset kind, genes like ApoE4 only increase your risk. They do not seal your fate. And that's because your lifestyle and your environment are also major players. And honestly, that's actually very empowering news.
And that idea of empowerment is the perfect way to jump into our third section. Because if it's not all locked into our genes, that means there are things that we can actually do about it. So let's talk about how we can be proactive with our brain health.
I absolutely love this quote because it makes a really complex idea so simple and easy to remember. It's a direct hit against the myth that there's nothing you can do to lower your risk. It's simple, really. Your brain needs good, healthy blood flow, just like your heart does. So the choices you make to protect your heart also protect your brain.
So what does that actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, the great news is we're not talking about complicated medical procedures. We're talking about 4 powerful pillars for a healthier life: getting regular exercise, eating a good diet, always challenging your brain by learning new things, and staying connected with your friends and your community. Every single one of these is a powerful tool for your long-term brain health. This is a totally fair question. Some people think, well, if there's no cure, what's the point of getting diagnosed? Isn't that just depressing? Why would you even want to know? Because knowing early is incredibly valuable. It's not about getting bad news. It's about gaining control. An early diagnosis can open the door to treatments that help manage symptoms. It gives you a chance to join cutting-edge clinical trials. And this is so important. It gives a person and their family time. Time to plan, to make important decisions, and to make sure their wishes are known. It is truly about empowerment, not despair.
And that feeling of empowerment leads us right into our final section: what life looks like after a diagnosis. There's this awful myth that life is basically over at that point, but the reality is so much more hopeful.
This statement right here, it completely reframes the whole story. It just rejects that idea that an Alzheimer's diagnosis is some kind of death sentence. Instead, it positions it as a turning point, the beginning of a new chapter that's going to require new strategies, new support, and a real focus on quality of life.
Now, this is such a critical distinction. Yes, it's true, we don't have a cure today, but it is a massive myth that there are no treatments. We have to be really clear with our words here. No cure absolutely does not mean no help.
And that help comes in so many different forms, from medications that can help manage symptoms to therapies that tap into creativity and connection, like music and art therapy. There are so many tools in the toolbox. All of these things are designed to boost quality of life and help people stay independent for as long as possible. A meaningful life absolutely can and does continue after a diagnosis.
So we've busted a lot of myths today, haven't we? We've learned that Alzheimer's isn't just a normal part of aging, that our lifestyle choices really matter, and that there is absolutely hope and life after a diagnosis. So the question I want to leave you with is this: how can we take all these facts and use them to fight the stigma, to change the conversation from one based on fear to one based on understanding and proactive action? Thanks for joining me.